Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never expected anything out of the ordinary that afternoon. It was just one of those quiet, lazy afternoons where the world outside seemed far away. My husband, Paul, had left early for a business meeting, and I had the house to myself. It wasn't uncommon for me to enjoy these moments of solitude. At 48, I was used to the rhythm of our lives, the comfort of routine, and the space that our home offered for personal reflection. The kids had grown up and moved out years ago, so it was just Paul and me now. Our lives a mixture of togetherness and the peaceful quiet of empty nesters. But as I sank into the familiar comfort of our living room sofa, sipping my coffee and listening to the distant hum of the world outside, I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was too early for Paul to be back, and I wasn't expecting anyone else. I got up to peek out the window, and to my surprise, it was Greg, Paul's best friend. I paused, momentarily unsure of how to react. It wasn't unusual for Greg to drop by, but something felt different this time. Maybe it was the way the air had shifted, the stillness that seemed to hang a little heavier in the room. You see, Greg and I had always shared a friendly rapport, but our relationship had always remained firmly rooted in the familiarity of the friendship that bound him to Paul. Never anything more, never anything less. But today, as I watched him get out of the car and make his way toward the door, a subtle sense of anticipation bubbled up inside me. I opened the door before he had a chance to knock. "Hey, Greg." I greeted him with a smile, trying to keep my voice light and casual. "What brings you by?" He returned my smile, his usual easygoing demeanor intact. "I thought I'd stop by and check in on you," he said, his voice warm but carrying an odd undertone I couldn't quite place. "Paul mentioned he'd be out all afternoon, and I figured you might be lonely." "Well, that's sweet of you," I replied, feeling a little awkward. "I'm doing fine, really. Just a quiet day. You're welcome to come in." As I stepped aside to let him in, I noticed how he seemed a little more present than usual. There was something about the way he carried himself, his posture, his eyes, a subtle shift that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He wasn't just the carefree friend who popped in to chat about sports or share a joke anymore. No, there was a depth to his presence today, a quiet confidence that made my heart beat a little faster than I expected. "Coffee?" I asked, trying to break the tension that had settled between us like an invisible thread, pulling us closer. "Sure, I'd love some," he said, and his smile deepened. As I turned to prepare the coffee, I felt his gaze on me, not in the casual, friendly way I was used to, but with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I hesitated for just a moment, my heart fluttering in my chest. I knew I should have asked him to leave, that it wasn't right, that Paul would be home soon. But for some reason I didn't. I poured the coffee, handed him a cup, and sat down across from him. We exchanged some light conversation, mostly about our respective days, but there was an undercurrent, something unspoken between us. I could feel it, like a slow burn that had started to creep into the room, but I couldn't figure out exactly what it was. It was as if the boundaries between us had become a little less defined, a little more porous. "So," Greg said after a few moments of silence, his voice lower now, "how have you been holding up? I know it's been tough with the kids moving out and all." I felt a strange flutter in my stomach at his question, the kind of flutter you get when someone asks a question that digs a little deeper than usual. The truth was, I had been struggling more than I let on. Sure, I put on a brave face, but inside, I sometimes felt lost. The emptiness of the house had begun to settle in, and despite the comfort of my marriage, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. "I've been okay," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Guess it's just a big adjustment. It's strange, being alone so much now. I'm still figuring out how to fill the space, you know." Greg nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I get it. Things change, and it's not always easy. But you're not alone, Mary. You've got people who care about you, including me." His words lingered in the air, charged with something more than just the usual friendly concern. I felt it then. The shift, the change, the undeniable pull that seemed to be drawing us closer. But before I could process it fully, he continued. "You know, I've always respected you, Mary," he said quietly. "You've got this strength about you, this grace. I admire that." The words sent a shiver through me. My heart quickened, and I suddenly found it hard to focus on anything else. Greg had always been complimentary, but this felt different. His tone was different, like he meant every word. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "Thanks, Greg. That means a lot." We both fell into silence again, the weight of his compliment hanging in the air between us. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the distant sounds of cars passing outside. But inside, it felt like the world had paused for just a moment, leaving just the two of us in this strange space, where everything felt intensified. Greg shifted in his seat, leaning forward slightly. "I know this might sound odd, but I've always wondered what it would be like if we spent more time together. Just the two of us, without Paul around." I froze. His words hung in the air, thick and undeniable. My heart raced, and for the first time that afternoon, I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me. Was this really happening? Was he really suggesting this? Before I could respond, Greg stood up and walked toward the window, his back to me. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, Mary. But sometimes, I don't know, I just feel like there's something between us that's worth exploring. Maybe it's just me." But I had to say it. The room felt smaller all of a sudden, the space between us charged with something unfamiliar. I wasn't sure what to say, what to do. Part of me wanted to reach out, to see where this would go. But another part of me, the part that had been raised to always be faithful and loyal, knew this wasn't right. Not now, not with Paul's best friend. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling slightly. "Greg, But before I could finish, he turned around. His eyes were softer now, but there was a longing in them that was hard to ignore. "I understand," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have said anything." And just like that, the moment seemed to dissipate. The tension, the unspoken connection, the temptation, it all faded, leaving us standing in the quiet aftermath. I forced a smile, though my heart was still pounding. "It's okay, Greg. I think we both just got caught up in the moment. Let's just forget it, okay?" He nodded, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. He didn't leave right away, and neither of us said much after that. We sat back down, the conversation returning to mundane topics. But the air was different now. It wasn't the same. When Paul finally arrived home later that afternoon, I didn't say anything. But deep down, I knew something had shifted, something I couldn't easily explain. What had happened between Greg and me was far from over. It lingered in the back of my mind, a question without an answer, a feeling that wouldn't fade. I couldn't help but wonder where this would lead, and what, if anything, would happen next. The days after that afternoon with Greg felt heavy, like I was walking through the world with a secret I couldn't quite shake. I tried to push it to the back of my mind, focusing on the little things. Paul's smile when he came home, the soft sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside, the quiet hum of daily life. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore the lingering tension between Greg and me. It wasn't just the way he had looked at me or the way his words had hung in the air. It was the way everything had felt too close, too intense, as though the distance between us had been narrowed without either of us realizing it. I thought about that moment often, sometimes in the quiet of the house when I was alone, sometimes while I was going about my day. It kept creeping into my thoughts, unwanted but undeniable. At night, I would lie in bed beside Paul, his gentle snoring filling the silence between us, and I would find myself staring at the ceiling, wondering what would have happened if I had said something different, if I had responded to Greg in a way that wasn't so cautious. What if I had let the moment unfold? What would it have been like? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Paul, thankfully, didn't notice this shift in my behavior. He was always so caught up in his work, his meetings, his projects, that he rarely seemed to notice anything beyond the surface. And I didn't blame him for it. We had built a life together, a comfortable life, the kind where nothing ever truly disrupted the flow. That was how I had always liked it, predictable, safe, secure. And yet, in the quiet of my thoughts, I couldn't stop questioning whether this still felt enough. A week passed, and it seemed like the tension between Greg and me had faded. He had come over a couple of times since that first afternoon, but each time he seemed to keep a more careful distance. The easygoing, joking tone was back, though there was still something about him that seemed different. He wasn't quite the same Greg I had known for years. It was subtle, like the way someone might wear a mask, not wanting anyone to see the true self beneath it. But then, one evening, I found myself facing a choice I hadn't expected. I had just finished a long day of errands and was looking forward to relaxing on the couch with a book. The house was quiet, and I felt the pull of solitude once again. But as I poured myself a glass of wine, I heard the familiar sound of Greg's car pulling into the driveway. I looked up at the clock. 7:30 p.m. It was a little later than usual, and Paul was still out on one of his business trips. I hesitated for a moment, the wine glass frozen in my hand. Should I let him in? Should I invite him to stay? Knowing how close we had come to something I wasn't ready to define yet. The thought of seeing him, of being near him again, made my pulse quicken. Before I could decide, there was a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I set the wine glass down and walked slowly to the door, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the handle. When I opened it, there he was. Greg. This time, he didn't have the usual casual smile. There was something more serious about him, something that felt almost deliberate. "Hey, Mary," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Can I come in?" I stood there for a moment, caught between the comfort of routine and the spark of something unfamiliar. My heart was racing, but I stepped aside, letting him in. "Of course," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. He didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he lingered near the door, looking around the living room, taking in the space like he was trying to figure out where he fit into it. It felt different this time, more intimate. As if this space had become ours, not just his and Paul's or mine and Paul's, but something more, something shared between the two of us. "You're alone?" Greg asked, his voice carrying a quiet concern that made my heart flutter once again. "Yeah, Paul's away for the night," I said, though I could hear the hesitation in my own voice. I wasn't expecting anyone tonight. Greg nodded, a glimmer of something unreadable in his eyes. "I know," he said, taking a few slow steps into the room. "I just needed to talk." I gestured to the couch. "Well, come sit then. What's going on? You seem serious." He sat down, but his posture was different than usual. It was almost like he was gathering his thoughts, weighing something important. The silence between us was thick, but not uncomfortable. It felt like the kind of silence that happens just before something changes, before a door is opened or a truth is spoken. "I've been thinking about the other day," he began, his voice low, almost hesitant. "About what I said. About us." My heart skipped a beat. I could feel the words hanging in the air, waiting to settle in the space between us. "I don't want to make things awkward, Mary," he continued, his gaze meeting mine. "But I can't stop thinking about you, about us, about what could happen if we didn't stop what's been building between us." My breath caught in my throat. There it was, the unspoken truth, now out in the open. I couldn't deny the attraction I felt. It was raw, it was real, and it had been simmering under the surface for weeks. But there was also fear. Fear of the consequences. Fear of what this would mean for my marriage, for my life, for everything I had known. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "Greg," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. "This isn't right. Paul's my husband. You're his best friend." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But what if this is more than just that? What if what we have is something we can't ignore anymore?" I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. I wasn't sure what to say or what to do. The truth was, a part of me didn't want to let go of what we shared. But the other part, the part that still held on to my vows, to the life I had built with Paul, didn't know how to reconcile the two. We sat in silence for a long while, the space between us thick with unspoken feelings. I didn't know what to do next or where this would lead. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened, things were never going to be the same again. The next few days passed in a blur. My mind raced with the weight of everything that had been said, everything that had been left unsaid. I spent the days trying to pretend that nothing had changed, that I was still the woman Paul married, still the person I was before that conversation with Greg. But each time I caught a glimpse of Greg in my thoughts, or felt the stir of something when I remembered the way his hand had brushed against mine, it all felt different. I tried to go about my daily routine. I went to the grocery store, cleaned the house, checked in on my friends. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unraveling. The life I had so carefully built, the routines I had clung to for comfort, were all beginning to slip away, piece by piece. I hadn't heard from Greg since that night. I wanted to, but I also feared it. I didn't know what to say to him anymore. I didn't know what we were anymore. It was late Thursday afternoon when it happened. I had just finished folding the laundry when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I glanced out the window, half expecting it to be Paul coming back from his trip. But when I saw Greg's familiar car parked outside, my stomach dropped. He was here. I stood there frozen for a moment, my heart thudding against my chest. I knew I had to make a choice, whether I would let him in and face whatever this was between us, or keep pretending like everything was fine, like it had never happened. My feet moved of their own accord. Before I could talk myself out of it, I found myself opening the door. Greg stood there on the porch, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. His expression was serious, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made my breath catch in my throat. He wasn't the confident, joking Greg that I had known for so long. This man was different. He was unsure, waiting for me to decide if we could move forward or if everything between us would crumble before it even began. "Hey," I said, trying to sound calm, though I could feel the nerves building inside me. "Hey," Greg replied, his voice a little more strained than usual. "Can we talk? Just for a minute." I stepped aside to let him in, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what was coming. I had known from the moment I saw his car pull up that this conversation was inevitable. We walked into the living room, the space feeling somehow smaller than usual, more intimate. Greg hesitated for a moment before sitting down on the couch. He didn't look at me right away. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, as though trying to gather his thoughts before speaking. "I've been thinking about what I said the other night," he began, his voice low, almost apologetic. "And I need to be honest with you, Mary. I don't want to make you feel pressured or anything, but I can't stop thinking about you. About us. About what happened that day." His words hung in the air, heavy and pregnant with meaning. I sat across from him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I knew this moment would come, but I hadn't prepared myself for it. "I've been thinking about it too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying to push it out of my mind, Greg. But it's hard. It's hard to forget something like that." Greg's gaze flicked up to mine, and for a split second I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "So you don't regret it?" The question took me by surprise, and I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to say yes, to tell him that everything had been a mistake, that we had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. But another part of me, the part that had never been seen before, the part that felt alive when Greg was near, wanted to say the opposite. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice shaky. "I don't know what to feel anymore. Everything's so complicated." Greg leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "I don't want to make this more difficult for you, Mary. I don't want to ruin your life. But I can't pretend like nothing happened. And I don't think you can either." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. It was impossible to go back to the way things were before, impossible to ignore the connection we had. The attraction, the chemistry, the way everything between us felt inevitable, even if we hadn't wanted it to be. But I wasn't sure what to do with it. I had made a commitment to Paul, and I loved him. He was my husband, my partner. I couldn't just throw that all away, no matter how much Greg made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. "I don't want to hurt Paul," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to lose everything I've built with him. But this, what's happening between us, it feels real. It feels like something I can't ignore." Greg's expression softened, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "I don't want to hurt him either, Mary. But we have to be honest with ourselves. I can't pretend like this doesn't mean something." I swallowed hard, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I had never been in a situation like this before. I didn't know what the right choice was, or if there even was a right choice. "Maybe we should take some time apart," I said quietly. "Figure things out on our own before we do something we'll regret." Greg nodded slowly, as if he understood the weight of what I was saying. "I get it. I really do. But I don't think I can stay away from you, Mary. Not now. Not after what we've shared." His words were like a spark to dry tinder, igniting something deep inside me. I knew this wasn't the end, not by a long shot. I could feel the pull between us, the tension, the longing. But it wasn't just about passion. It was about something deeper, something more profound, a connection neither of us could ignore. The days that followed were a blur, a haze of confusion and uncertainty that seemed to stretch on forever. After that conversation with Greg, I had retreated into myself. I wasn't sure if I was running from the truth or if I was simply trying to hold on to the life I had built with Paul. My heart pulled me in two directions, each more desperate than the last. Greg and I hadn't spoken since that day. He respected my need for space, but I could feel him lingering in the edges of my thoughts, like a shadow I couldn't escape. I couldn't ignore what had happened between us, couldn't pretend like I hadn't felt something more than friendship. But at the same time, the guilt gnawed at me. I knew I was playing with fire, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that I wasn't burning. Paul had returned from his trip, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. We slipped back into the comfortable rhythms of our marriage, going through the motions as we always had. He didn't notice the small shifts in me, the way my smile didn't quite reach my eyes, or the way I seemed to always be lost in thought. He didn't see the way I stiffened whenever Greg's name came up, or how I could no longer look at Paul without seeing the face of the man I was keeping secrets from. One evening, about a week after Greg had come over, I found myself alone in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. I heard the sound of the front door opening, followed by the sound of Paul's footsteps echoing through the house. My heart leaped in my chest, a mixture of relief and dread. It was always like this when he came home, comforting, familiar, and yet, now, filled with a tension I couldn't shake. "Hey, babe," Paul called from the hallway, his voice warm and inviting. "How was your day?" "Good," I answered, turning away from the chopping board to face him. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't quite bring myself to meet his eyes. "How was your trip?" "Long," Paul replied with a tired smile. "But it's good to be home." He walked into the kitchen, wrapping his arms around me from behind. He kissed the top of my head, a gesture so familiar, so comforting, that it made the guilt inside me twist even harder. "You know I missed you, right?" he murmured. I nodded, swallowing hard. "I missed you too." He stepped back slightly, his hands resting on my hips as he studied me. "Is everything okay? You seem a little off. Is something bothering you?" I froze. My mind raced, my heart pounded. What was I supposed to say? That I had been thinking about his best friend every day for the past week? That I was torn between loyalty to him and something